Hello, this is Reverend Don Lewis coming to you from the beautiful metaverse and more specifically from beautiful Danville, Illinois, homeland of the Corellian tradition. And this is Midday with Reverend Don. And my scheduled guest for today was Krys Copeland, who normally joins us on Wednesdays, but Krys is not able to make it today. And so I am here by myself. But I'm going to go ahead and talk about some of our things coming from Corellian Publishing. And as you know, we have a number of books that we're expecting to bring out in the next few weeks, including the Witch Wars Defense Manual Volume 2 and Reverend Don's book of Stones, Metals, and Crystals. And we also have The Court of the Five Tribes, which is new. And we've talked about various of these books in the last few weeks. Today, I thought I would probably talk a little bit more about Reverend Don's book of Stones, Metals, and Crystals. And, in the pagan community, we make a lot of use of stones, metals, and crystals. We make a lot of use of many objects in spellcraft as amulets or talismans. And this is in the pagan community, in the magical community, in all traditional magical enterprises. For the most part, we use many natural substances as well as many created objects for the energies that they either embody or attract. And hello to Nikki in the chat room. It's good to see you. And that basically is what this book is about. How to do this and what the properties you can expect in certain stones, metals, and crystals are. And of course, we know that this is also true for herbs and many other things that we regularly use in magic. But in this case, we're looking at stones. And one of the reasons I've written this particular book is that for me, I do a lot more work with stones than I do, for example, with herbs. I do some work with herbs, but I was never particularly an herbalist. I was always much more of a person who would use stones. It's not uncommon for me to have a stone or two in my pocket to attract certain energies. Hello to Antonio in the chat room. It's good to see you. Or a ring with certain energies connected to it for the purpose of drawing those energies around me, or to use them in magical practices for crystal grids, for example, or as part of the altar setup, or as part of an amulet, or as a talisman in their own right, to stimulate the particular energies they have to deal with. And to me, this is kind of second nature. And, I think to all humans, or most humans at least, this is second nature. If you look at children, they commonly do things like collect rocks that attract them. They can't say to you necessarily, well, the energy of that rock attracted me. But that's basically what's happening. They are drawn to it, they collect it, and they keep it. And they instinctively know it's pulling something around them. Or at least it seems that way to me. When we collect those things that we're attracted to, we're not attracted to them for no reason. People who have large collections of found stones may say and may believe they collected them because of what they look like. And that may be a part of it, but it's also what they feel like. What they feel is energetic. And the same with people who collect seashells, which also have their own kind of energy that can be very useful magically. And I am a great believer in, and frequently repeat the concept that we don't need anything for magic. In its truest form, magic occurs in the relationship between ourself and the universe. And it does not need anything external to influence it in order for it to happen. However, those external things can be helpful. And if you've read my various books, And if you haven't, you can find them at corellianpublishing.com. But if you've read my various books, you'll know that I often describe these things as being keys. They're there to help you to tune into the energies you're trying to work with, to help to stimulate those energies around you, but they're not necessary. They're helpful. Virtually anything you can name is helpful, but not necessary. And if you think about it, magic wouldn't be all that useful if all these external things were actually necessary. Magic is useful to us because we can use it, as I like to say, when the car is skidding off the road, or when we're in a place that we do not have the things we might like to have. Magic is helpful to us because we can still use it then, because it's in the relationship between ourselves and existence. And, I would love to say that it is a consciously easy thing to do. It's not. You have to learn it. And even then, all kinds of things can influence it. But at the same time, magic really is one of the easiest things in existence. We all do it unconsciously all the time, but what we don't realize, and what still takes work even when we're quite accomplished, is understanding the ways in which we counteract our own will. The ways in which things that are within our shadow, the parts of ourself that we do not consciously know or acknowledge, can cause us to have crossed wires in our magical workings. And this is one of the things that makes those external items more helpful than they might otherwise be. Because when we have that kind of crossed wire, when we have something in our shadow that is stopping us from achieving what we want consciously, sometimes those external things can be very helpful in overcoming that if we're not intellectually ready to deal with it. And I'll give you a couple of examples of that. A lot of people want to use magic for romantic purposes. And hello, Renee in the chat room. And we always say, you shouldn't do that on particular people. That's not the appropriate use of it. You do it instead for drawing romance into your life, drawing the best romance for you into your life, rather than picking a person who doesn't necessarily want to be there. Which doesn't stop people from doing that, but it's still better not to do it that way. It's better to do it for romance itself and let the universe provide the person. But at the same time that people often have this goal, they're also often blocking it unconsciously because either A, they don't feel they can have that romance, or their inner feelings about romance are not so positive. And this is where shadow work is very important in dealing with those things. But if you're not ready for shadow work, there are certain stones that can be very helpful in dealing with that kind of self-blockage. And for romantic issues, the stones that I would normally recommend include rose quartz for general romance and also self-love, and rhodonite and rhodochrosite are also stones I strongly recommend for dealing with romantic issues, and particularly for overcoming trauma on past romantic issues or shadow issues about romance. And what do you do with these? Well, you could carry them in your pocket to draw that energy around you. You could use them in a spell. You could set them in jewelry. And that's an example of how we use stones. And the book, Rev Don's Book of Stones, Metals, and Crystals, includes relatively in-depth discussions of many, many different stones that you might find yourself using. There is a long alphabetical list of them and what you do with them. And, rose quartz, rhodonite, and rhodochrosite, or some will say rhodochrosite, are among those stones. But there are many others. And So most of them are natural stones that are mined out of the earth, but some of them are not. And one of the ones that is not is this stone. And this is called goldstone. Centuries ago, it was called aventurine. Today, a different stone is called aventurine. But goldstone is a kind of glass. It is a glass that is made using stone, but it's an artificial synthetic stone that I believe was first made in Venice hundreds of years ago. And it's been in use for a very long time. And it's particularly used for money magic. My mother used it frequently for that purpose, and it's very effective for that. So if you see someone wearing goldstone, they may be working to attract money around them. And if you're looking to do that yourself, it's a very good stone to use for it. But it's not a stone that's been mined out of the earth. It is a synthetic stone. That does not stop it from being effective. Another stone that you'll find in that list of stones that is not really a stone at all is the pearl. Pearls can be very valuable as a magical stone, but they're not a stone. They are a secretion, I believe that would be the way you would put it, of certain mollusks, such as oysters, and other things like the conch. A conch pearl is the rarest form of pearl, and does not look like an oyster pearl at all, but is the same thing. And again, it's not a stone in the normal sense of the word, but is treated as a stone magically. And what do you do with pearls? Well, pearls are very good for happiness, emotional satisfaction, and good emotional situations. And it's said of pearl jewelry, and pearls in general, that they only collect positive emotion, and that they will build up that charge around a person, which is one of the things that magically has made them popular for millennia. Another stone that was once very popular and no longer really is, but is frequently a subject in magical trivia, is the beeswax stone. And the beeswax stone is also not a stone. It is created in the belly of certain animals. And it resembles a stone, and it was formerly used very widely for magic, particularly as an antidote to poison or to baneful magic. It is no longer very common. For one thing, it would be rather difficult to find one now, compared to in former times when access to barnyard animals was more common. And the other thing, of course, is we now know that it's not that good for combating poison. But back in the day, the beeswax stone was one of the most sought-after magical stones because there was a belief that if you put it in your glass of wine or what have you, it would neutralize whatever poison was there. And why did they think that? Well, one of the more common poisons in past times was arsenic. And it actually does have some effect with that, but not beyond that. And so you don't really see them now, but they're another example of something that was treated magically as a stone, but really is not one. And so when we talk about stones, metals, and crystals, we're also talking about things that are used in the same way. Another thing that I make a strong point of every time I talk about this is that it's not only natural stones that can be used this way. And I'll give you an example of that out of my little box here. I'll use this one. Diamonds are a very powerful magical stone, and they are used to create permanence, to create strong situations, to create things that will hold up, and also to give a person that kind of strength. And we have here a diamond ring. Diamonds, of course, are not as valuable as they're made out to be. Diamonds are worth about 10% of what you pay for them in a jewelry store. But getting a natural diamond is not that common a thing. Most diamonds today, I believe, are grown, at least the ones that you're likely to get. they're grown in labs. Still diamonds, but they're grown in labs as often as they're mined out of the soil, and that's true for things like rubies and emeralds as well. You can get natural ones, but um, if they're of high quality, they will be quite expensive. But just because a stone is grown in a laboratory does not mean that it's not useful magically. It does introduce some specific issues to using it magically, but it doesn't mean that it's not valuable that way, because after all, it's still the same stone. It's still it's created in a special circumstance, but ultimately in the same way and from the same things. So a synthetic stone that's been grown in a laboratory is the same energy as a natural stone, except what you will find is that with a made stone like that, it's going to be much more uniform in how it embodies the energies that are associated with that stone, whereas a natural one that's been mined out of the earth and is thousands of years in the making is going to be more idiosyncratic. Whereas if you're using a lab-grown ruby, for example, it's going to be pretty predictable in how it will embody the characteristics of a ruby, magically speaking, whereas a natural one might vary considerably depending on things that have influenced it. That's why, going back to goldstone, um, unless you've picked up an antique goldstone that's been around for a long time, they're going to be very predictable. They're not going to be idiosyncratic. They're going to have that money drawing quality of a goldstone. If it has been around for a few hundred years, which they've been in use that long, it may have picked up some idiosyncratic tendencies. Stones are not uniform, and the natural ones especially so, and you have to work with them to figure out what they're really best at. It may be what they're commonly used for, or in some cases, it may be different depending on where they've been, how they developed, and in some cases, who has previously had them and how they may have charged them. And these are all things to consider when working with stones. The third quality of stone I want to mention in that breath is um, the other kind of synthetic stone that is not a lab-grown crystal, but may still have its own properties. And my favorite example of that was marlinite. And marlinite was a stone that usually appeared in shades of dark red and bright yellow. And it was a synthetic stone, and it was named after Marlena Behrendt, the rock lady of Chicago. And it was used also like a goldstone for attracting money and prosperity. And it could be quite effective. I had some that worked quite well for me back in the day. I don't believe I still have any of them, but I did back in the day. And they were made from the side effects of mining operations. So they were effectively reconstituted stone that had been dyed. And yet, they still had energy. They still had a particular power, and the nature of the stones that they were reconstituted from, and they came from a particular mine, did give them this energy. And the stones that were presumably being brought out of that mine, or metals as the case may be, presumably encouraged that energy as well. But just because something has been synthetically made, don't assume it has no energy. Pick it up, feel it, work with it. You might be very surprised by the energy that you find in it. And this again becomes more true over time, because even the most mundane object, if used magically and over time, will pick up a good bit of energy. When we talk about using natural items for the energy they contain, it's true for all items. All items can be energetically charged, intentionally or unintentionally. And when you're doing magic, you want to remember that. You don't want to dismiss anything on the assumption that it couldn't possibly be magical, because everything can be, and very often is. Um, and I would hope that people who read this book, which should be out by the end of the month, it's in its final editing where it's been for a few weeks. But I would hope that would be one of the major lessons they take away from it, that everything can be magical. And part of that depends on you. And um, whether you can attach to it, whether you can feel it, whether you can work with it. And of course you can, but do you allow yourself to? And so often I see people who make all these barriers that stop them from doing things, magically as well as otherwise, and they assume um, that everything is just much harder than it really should be, and that only very, very few things are really magical. And it's not really true. Our whole world is magical. Life itself is magic. And if you really want to understand metaphysics, you must understand that. And this is the core, or part of the core, of that famous Hermetic maxim, as above, so below. And what that means is, as above, in this case, we're referring to spirit, we're referring to deity, we're referring to the life force of the universe. And as below is us and our world. And the idea is that they really, in the end, are the same. All the magic that's up there is also down here. There is nothing that is not part of the same magical universe. And when we try to separate it and think, only this little piece over here is magical, we're censoring our own abilities, we're censoring the world that we live in. And, I cannot too strongly encourage you not to do that, but rather to embrace magic in every moment and everything. And in talking about stones and metals and crystals, they're all around us. The earth itself is heavily made up of these things. Items that we use in everyday life are often heavily made up of these things. And, though they all have their energy. Sometimes it's a very strong energy, sometimes it's a weaker energy, but it's always there. And this is why, for example, we do energetic cleansings, including of things that we don't necessarily interact with in a consciously magical way, but they too create and receive energetic charges, even if there's something as simple as a pair of scissors, which, as you see, are made of metal. And like any other metal, they can be energetically charged and need to be occasionally cleansed. When we work with our altars, when we do ritual, we very often start with a ritual cleansing to remove negativity. Why do we do that? Because all of these things can accept a negative charge in an unintentional sort of way or an intentional sort of way. And for those who are not familiar with the subject, when we say negative energy, we don't necessarily mean something from a horror film. Negative energy also includes just uncharged energy, modeled blank energy, for want of a better way to put it. Energy that is just kind of muddying up the water. That too is considered a negative charge. That's part of what we cleanse when we do that little cleansing at the start of a ritual. When we purify ourselves in various ways, it's not necessarily trying to get rid of the kind of thing you see in a horror film. Most negative energy is really just kind of muddy and not very useful, and it can tend to bog down our ability to manifest positive energy. That's why we cleanse it. And Everything can hold that kind of charge. Getting back to stones, metals, and crystals, this is one of the reasons I emphasize it's not only some, it's all of them. It's not just the stones that are historically used in magic, um, or the metals historically used in magic, like gold and silver and copper and iron and tin, um, or lead for that matter, which has a historical use in magic. But, any kind of metal, regardless of how non-magical it may seem, can still hold an energetic charge. And you don't want to forget that. You don't want to say, "Well, it's just a pair of scissors. They're pot metal. What kind of charge could they hold?" Well, they're still metal. Yes, they can hold a charge. Um, Everything can hold a charge. You may think of plastic, for example, as being something that would be totally non-magical, but it too can hold a charge. It absolutely can hold a charge. Not necessarily at the strength that you would expect metal to do so, but don't forget about it. Don't just assume that it doesn't count. Your little mouse or hamster, as the case may be, because you'll notice it does not have a tail, so this one is more of a hamster. But it too can hold a charge. Everything that exists has an energetic component, which therefore can be affected energetically and can affect energetically. And this is very important to remember. And a lot of people who consider themselves very skilled in magic don't seem to have any awareness of anything out of the ordinary. The things that were used traditionally, they're aware were magical, but other things they think somehow are not, and they are. I mentioned the traditional metals that are used in magic. I mentioned tin, which is associated with Jupiter, which is, by the way, a powerful association. But tin was the pot metal of its day. Tin was the metal that cheap utensils were made from, but it was still understood to be magical, and everything is magical. And on that note, I must take a moment for a word from our sponsors. Why? Because we have sponsors, and we love our sponsors. We hope you love our sponsors too. Ready to unlock the secrets of the universe? Join me, Rev Don Lewis, for my metaphysical and magic auctions at Gaia Thrift at whatnot.com. Discover fascinating artifacts, mystical crystals, and rare and unusual books that could change your life. Don't miss this chance to bring a little magic into your world. Rev Don's Metaphysical and Magic Auctions, where the extraordinary can become yours. And thank you to our sponsors. And so if you take anything away from today's program, what I hope you will take away from it is the knowledge that everything is magical, and that you will not try to practice magic as a sequestered thing in your life, but as part of the total quality of your life, because it is, whether you're conscious of it or not. So be conscious of it. And if you want to learn how to do that, go to CorellianPublishing.com. We have lots of books by myself and other authors telling you exactly how to practice magic. The Corellian first degree lessons are um, an excellent instruction manual on the basics of magic and meditation and many other things. Reverend Don's Books of Questions, currently in 3 volumes, eventually in 4, will educate you on all sorts of subjects. Each one has 100 different questions from Reverend Don's vlog that deal with all kinds of metaphysical subjects, including some you might not expect. And we also have things like 40 Spells to Better Magic, Reverend Don's Book of Numerology, Reverend Don's Book of Astrology, the Corellian Book of the Dead, and many, many more books on many magical subjects and substances. So a great place to start or complete your magical education, and more work coming. So I hope that you enjoy that. I hope you have a lovely day. And now let us close with our prayer, as we always do. Divine Mother Goddess, Divine Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you for all that you do for us in our lives, and we rejoice in your presence in our lives. And we ask you to help us to remember that everything is magical, that that which is below is like that which is above, and that all things can be used to consciously create the world we wish to see. Beloved Mother Goddess, beloved Father God, beloved ancestors, we thank you with great love, and knowing you are always with us from respect, we thank you for your presence, and may you be blessed now and always. May you be blessed now and always. I'll see you tomorrow, and until next time, have a wonderful day.